For 5 years, I built hard innovations from a folding table and a dream that wasn't even mine alone. I still remember the tiny rented office with the flickering light and the cracked window that wouldn't close all the way in winter. I was the one who patched the draft with duct tape. Do you think this will ever be real? Selena asked me back then, sitting cross-legged on the floor with blueprints spread around her. It already is, I told her. We just haven't convinced the world yet. She smiled at me like I was the safest place she knew. I designed the first 3 product prototypes myself. I negotiated with skeptical investors who looked at us like we were children playing business. I worked weekends, holidays, birthdays. When cash flow nearly killed us in year 1, I sold my car. You sold it? She asked, staring at me across the desk. We needed payroll, I said. I can take the bus. Her eyes filled with tears. I'll make this worth it. I promise. I don't need it to be worth it, I said. I just need us to survive. We did more than survive. By year 3, we had a real office. By year 4, we had a staff of 30. By year 5, Heart Innovations was labeled one of the fastest growing companies in the industry. Somewhere in that rise, Selena started disappearing. Can we have dinner tonight? I asked one evening as she typed rapidly on her laptop. I can't, she replied without looking up. Investor dinner. You've had 3 this week. That's what growth requires. What about what we require? She sighed. Why does everything have to be emotional with you? I leaned back. It's not emotional to want time with the person I built this with. You didn't build it alone, she said sharply. The words stung more than I expected. I didn't say I did, I replied quietly. That was around the time Brandon Pierce entered the picture. He arrived polished and confident, with a resume from a top consulting firm and a vocabulary filled with words like optimization and leverage. Selena introduced us in the conference room. This is Brandon, my new executive assistant, she said. He's going to help streamline operations. Brandon extended his hand. I've heard a lot about you. Good things, I hope, I replied. He smiled faintly. Foundational things. I didn't know what that meant then. Within months, meetings changed. I think we should delay the launch, I said during one strategy session. The software isn't stable enough. Brandon leaned forward. Data suggests the market window is now. Delaying could signal weakness. Selena nodded slowly. I agree with Brandon. I looked at her. You agreed with me yesterday. That was before we reviewed updated projections, she said briskly. After the meeting, I followed her into her office. What just happened? I asked. It's called adapting, she replied. It's called ignoring me. She closed her laptop with a snap. Not everything is about you. I know that, I said, trying to stay calm. But I've been right beside you since day 1. And I appreciate that, she said, though her tone felt rehearsed. But we're not in day 1 anymore. Brandon's presence expanded like a shadow at noon. He filtered her calls. He sat beside her in every meeting. My suggestions were not aligned. His were strategic. One night, I found her still at the office near midnight. Let's go home, I said softly from the doorway. She didn't look up. You go, Brandon, and I need to finish revising the pitch deck. I can help. Brandon glanced at me. We've got it covered. Selena gave a small nod. It's under control. Under control. 5 years of shared struggle reduced to a polite dismissal. The 5th anniversary celebration was held at a downtown rooftop venue, all glass and gold lights. Investors, media, employees, everyone was there. I stood near the back while Selena took the stage in a white suit that caught every camera flash. 5 years ago, she began, Heart Innovations was just an idea. I smiled faintly. It took resilience, vision, and an extraordinary team to turn that idea into reality. Applause rippled through the crowd. I want to thank our department heads, our investors, and especially my executive assistant, Brandon Pierce, whose strategic insight has elevated this company to the next level. More applause. Brandon nodded modestly from the front row. I waited. She continued. The future of Heart Innovations has never been brighter. She stepped away from the microphone. That was it. No mention of the man who sold his car. No mention of the nights on the office floor. No mention of me. After the speeches, people toasted and laughed. A few early employees approached me. You must be proud, one of them said. I am, I replied honestly. Later that evening, Selena found me, standing near the balcony. "You've been quiet," she observed. I was listening. She inhaled slowly. "We need to talk." I nodded. "Okay." She kept her eyes on the skyline. "I've changed. I've noticed. I want different things now," she continued. "Bigger things. And I don't fit into that." She hesitated just long enough. "I think I've outgrown the life we once shared." The words landed gently but cut deep. "Outgrown," I repeated. "You're steady," she said. "You're loyal. But I need someone who matches where I'm going." "Is this about Brandon?" "This is about me," she replied quickly. I searched her face for doubt. I found none. "So that's it?" I asked. "I think it's best." I expected anger to rise in me. It didn't. Just a strange, hollow calm. "I won't argue," I said. She looked almost relieved. "Thank you for understanding." "I always did," I replied. I left the party without saying goodbye to anyone else. The city air felt colder than it should have. 5 years, reduced to a footnote. But as I walked down the empty street, something inside me refused to collapse. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the first chapter where I stopped standing in someone else's spotlight. The next morning, my phone rang while I was pouring coffee in my quiet apartment. Unknown number. I almost let go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. "Hello." A smooth, confident voice responded. "Is this the man who built Heart Innovations?" "The man who built Heart Innovations?" I repeated into the phone. "That's what I hear," the voice replied smoothly. "Ethan Cole, Nova Dynamics." I knew the name. Selena's biggest competitor. "I'm listening," I said carefully. "I'd prefer to speak in person," Ethan replied. "Private meeting. No assumptions. Just conversation." "Why me?" A small pause. "Because builders recognize builders." We met that afternoon at Nova Dynamics headquarters. Glass walls, clean lines, intentional silence. Ethan greeted me personally. "I appreciate you coming," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I'm surprised you called." "I'm not," he replied. "I've watched Heart for 5 years. And I know who was in the background." We sat in a conference room overlooking the city. "I'm not here to discuss Selena," he said immediately. "That's refreshing. I'm here to discuss you. What would you build if you weren't holding someone else's ladder?" The question caught me off guard. "I've never been just support," I said. "I know," he replied. "So tell me your ideas." For the next 40 minutes, I spoke without interruption. Market inefficiencies, product scalability flaws in the industry, a modular tech platform I had once pitched but shelved. Ethan didn't check his phone, didn't redirect credit. He leaned forward. "Why didn't Hart execute this?" he asked. "It wasn't aligned with branding direction," I said carefully. He smiled slightly, meaning it wasn't her idea. I didn't answer. He tapped the table once. "Come to Nova as Chief Strategy Officer." I blinked. "That's not a small offer. I don't make small offers." "You don't know if I can deliver." "I do," he said calmly. "You've been delivering for years without the title. What's the catch? You build, you lead, you get the credit, and you compete fairly." "With her," I said. "With the market," he corrected. I held his gaze. "If I say yes, I'm not joining to revenge build." "Good," he replied. "Revenge is short-term fuel. Vision lasts." I extended my hand. "Then yes." My first day at Nova felt unfamiliar in the best way. Natalie Quinn, head of product development, met me in the lobby. "So you're the legend," she said with a playful smirk. "I hope not. Legends usually end badly." She laughed. "Good. We prefer collaborators." In our first strategy session, I outlined the modular platform concept. Natalie leaned back. "This would cut integration costs by 30% and reduce rollout time by half." I added. A senior engineer nodded. "Why hasn't anyone done this yet?" "Because it disrupts traditional revenue pacing," I replied. "Companies fear short-term dips." Ethan, seated at the end of the table, looked at me. "And we take the dip," I said, "and dominate long-term." Silence. Then Natalie smiled. "I like him." Ethan nodded once. "Build it. No resistance. No territorial insecurity. Just momentum." For the first time in years, my ideas didn't need defending. They needed execution. Weeks blurred into focused energy. Whiteboard sessions. Late-night prototype reviews. Heated debates that ended in mutual respect. One evening, Natalie tossed me a tablet. Investor response, she said. I scanned the screen. Pre-commitments. Early adoption inquiries. This is before launch. I asked. Word travels fast, she replied, especially when strategy has a spine. I exhaled slowly. I had forgotten what it felt like to be valued for my mind instead of tolerated for my loyalty. Across town, Hard Innovations wasn't experiencing the same momentum. I heard it first from former colleagues. Things feel off, one text read. Another called me late one night. Off how? I asked. Brandon's running point on initiatives he doesn't fully understand, she whispered. He overrides department leads. And Selena? She backs him. Every time. A week later, at a tech networking event, I ran into Victor Lang, Hart's longtime operations director. He studied me quietly. You look lighter. I am, I admitted. He nodded once. Hart isn't. I waited. Replacing loyalty with ego always comes at a price, he said carefully. Have you told her that? I have, he replied. She thinks resistance equals fear. And you? I think inexperience disguised as confidence is expensive. Before walking away, he added, be prepared. Markets correct imbalance. Back at Nova, our prototype demo drew a packed room. I stood beside Natalie as she presented integration metrics. Then I took over. This isn't just a product, I said. It's an infrastructure shift. Questions flew. I answered each one calmly. Afterward, Ethan approached me. You were meant for this seat, he said. I was always meant to build, I replied. Launch day exceeded projections by 40%. Investors increased their stake. Tech blogs labeled us the unexpected disruptor. That night, Natalie handed me a glass of champagne. To being seen, she said. To building with the right people, I corrected. 2 months later, headlines shifted. Hart Innovations faces internal audit after contract irregularities surface. I read the article twice. Anonymous sources cited manipulated vendor contracts, inflated consultancy fees, questionable authorization chains. Brandon's name appeared subtly, but repeatedly. My phone buzzed. It was Victor. You've seen it? He asked. Yes. It's worse than the article suggests. How bad? Preliminary review shows contracts rerouted through shell vendors. For personal gain, I asked. That's the suspicion. And Selena? She signed off, Victor said quietly, trusting his summaries. I closed my eyes briefly. She replaced experience with flattery. Victor continued. Now the numbers are speaking. That evening, another alert hit. Leaked internal report suggests executive assistant manipulated company contracts for personal benefit. Brandon Pierce, the same man who once dismissed my strategic concerns. I set my phone down slowly. Across the city, I imagined chaos unfolding in glass offices I once helped furnish. But inside Nova's headquarters, the lights were steady. The systems clean. The leadership aligned. I didn't feel triumph. I felt confirmation. The next morning, Ethan walked into my office holding a printed copy of the report. Interesting timing, he said. I met his gaze. Markets correct imbalance. He smiled faintly. Indeed, they do. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It started with a name. Rebecca Shaw is leading the audit. Natalie told me one morning, scrolling through industry updates on her tablet. She's relentless. I've heard, I replied. Rebecca had a reputation for finding what others hoped would stay buried. 2 days later, Oliver Grant published the first article. Inside Hart Innovations. Executive oversight or strategic negligence? I read it in my office before our weekly leadership call. Oliver didn't speculate. He cited documents, contract amendments, vendor inconsistencies, approval chains that looped strangely back to Brandon. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Victor, it's accelerating, he said without greeting. How bad? Investors are nervous. Rebecca found payments routed through consultancy shells tied to Brandon's college roommate. And Selena? She says it's a misunderstanding. Is it? No, Victor replied flatly. By the end of the week, Hart stock dipped 12%. The board announced an emergency review. At Nova, the timing couldn't have been sharper. We were finalizing launch for our modular platform. In the main conference room, Ethan stood at the head of the table. Market instability creates opportunity, he said. But we went on merit, not chaos. I nodded. Then we stayed disciplined. Natalie pulled up final adoption metrics. Pre-orders exceed projections by 60%. Customer confidence? I asked. Strong, she said. They're tired of executive drama. They want reliability. I understood that more than she knew. Across town, Hart was unraveling. Brandon tried to contain it. I know because I received the email. Subject: clarification regarding strategic foundations. He copied board members, legal counsel, and me. In early developmental stages, he wrote, strategic frameworks were loosely structured by former associates whose lack of formal oversight may have contributed to systemic gaps. Former associates. That was me. Caleb forwarded it with one line. He's desperate. An hour later, Victor called. He's implying your early operational models enabled loopholes. My models were transparent, I said evenly. Every vendor vetted. Every contract dual signed. I know, Victor replied. Rebecca knows too. That afternoon, Oliver published again. Audit documents contradict claims of foundational oversight failures. The article included timestamps. Contract manipulations began 3 years after I left internal finance supervision. Digital authorization trails traced directly to Brandon's credentials. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt unsurprised. Brandon held a press briefing the next day. I categorically deny any intentional misconduct, he said, eyes tight. Operational decisions were collaborative. A reporter asked, did CEO Selena Hart approve the vendor reallocations? He hesitated half a second too long. All executive summaries were shared appropriately. Shared, not explained, not understood. Shared. That evening, Victor's voice sounded heavier than before. She confronted him, he told me. How did that go? He blamed pressure, rapid growth, claimed he was protecting quarterly optics. And she believed him? Silence. No, Victor admitted. Not this time. Rebecca's full preliminary report reached the board 48 hours later. Improper vendor relationships, inflated service retainers, performance bonuses tied to artificially structured savings. Brandon's signature was everywhere. Selena's was beneath it. Not fraudulent, but negligent. Investors pulled back. 3 major funds froze expansion capital. Hart's valuation dipped again. Meanwhile, at Nova, we stood on a stage beneath clean white lights. Ethan introduced me without embellishment. Chief Strategy Officer, he said simply. I stepped forward. This platform wasn't built to disrupt competitors, I said into the microphone. It was built to correct inefficiencies we've all tolerated too long. Screens behind me displayed live integration demos. Applause rolled through the auditorium. Within hours, industry feeds labeled Nova Dynamics the fastest-growing company of the quarter. Natalie hugged me backstage. You just reset the standard. I exhaled slowly. We did, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew she was watching. I found out later how. Victor told me Selena had watched the live stream replay alone in the executive conference room after most staff had left. She didn't say anything, he said quietly. She just stared at the product breakdown slides. Those slides looked familiar because they were. The modular architecture, the scalable vendor transparency model, the phased rollout cushion. Ideas I had once pitched across a smaller table. Ideas she had once dismissed as not aligned. She asked me one question, Victor added. What? Did he bring that to us first? I didn't answer right away. And what did you tell her? I finally asked. The truth. That night, my phone lit up with a message I hadn't seen in months. Selena, we need to talk. I stared at it for a long moment. Me about what? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Returned. Selena. Not as CEO. Not as competitors. Just us. I didn't respond immediately. 10 minutes later, another message. Selena, I understand now. Understand. A word that once would have unraveled me. Me, tomorrow. My office. For PM. Her reply came quickly. Selena, thank you. The next afternoon, I stood by the window in my office at Nova. Below, the city moved with its usual indifference. Natalie paused at my doorway. You sure about this? Yes. You don't owe anyone closure, she said. I'm not offering closure, I replied. I'm offering clarity. At exactly 4 p.m., my assistant buzzed me. She's here. My pulse remained steady. Send her in. The door opened slowly. Selena stepped inside, not in a power suit, not followed by staff, not carrying authority like armor. Just Selena. In her hands was a thick folder. She didn't speak immediately. She walked forward and placed a folder gently on my desk. I should have given you this years ago, she said quietly. I looked down at the cover. My name was printed across the top. I hadn't expected to see that. I stared at the folder on my desk, my name printed across the top in Selena's handwriting. Open it, she said softly. I did. Inside were the original business plans we had sketched out 5 years earlier. Yellowed pages, margin notes, coffee stains. My handwriting tangled with hers. I ran my fingers across a diagram I had drawn during our second year. You kept these, I said. Yes. Why? She took a slow breath. Because they reminded me of who I was before I started chasing applause. I looked up at her. They reminded me of the person who believed in me before investors did. She continued. Before headlines. Before valuation reports. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't hostile. I was proud of you, I said quietly. Every step. I know, she replied. That's what makes this harder. She moved closer to the desk. I chose ambition over loyalty. Not because you weren't enough, but because I was afraid of losing momentum. You didn't just choose ambition, I said. You chose flattery. You chose someone who made you feel powerful instead of someone who made you feel supported. Her eyes lowered. Brandon told me what I wanted to hear. You told me what I needed to hear. And I paid for it. Yes, she whispered. You did. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I'm sorry, she said finally. Not for the breakup alone, but for erasing you while I was rising. For allowing him to wedge himself between us. For dismissing your ideas. For pretending I built everything alone. I believed her, and that surprised me. I forgive you, I said. Her head lifted quickly. You do? Yes. Relief flickered across her face. But forgiveness isn't the same as going back, I added gently. The relief softened into understanding. I know, she said. I don't expect that. My future isn't tied to heart anymore, I continued. It isn't tied to what we were. She nodded. I see that now. She glanced around my office, the glass walls, the city view, the subtle Nova branding. You look at home, she observed. I am. She closed the folder and pushed it back toward me. They're yours. They always were. I rested my hand on top of it. Thank you. She gave me a small, genuine smile. Build something extraordinary. I planned to. When she left, I didn't feel loss. I felt completion. Months passed. Rebecca's final report led to formal charges against Brandon. Fraud, contract manipulation, corporate misconduct. He was removed from Heart in disgrace. Selena stepped down as CEO shortly after. Public statement. Full accountability. No excuses. Victor later told me she declined media interviews. She's rebuilding quietly, he said. Good, I replied. At Nova, growth wasn't explosive, it was intentional. We expanded internationally. Secure partnerships based on transparency clauses I insisted on writing personally. Trust scales better than hype, I told our executive team during one global strategy call. Natalie smiled across the table. Put that on the lobby wall. Maybe I will, I said. Our collaboration deepened naturally. Late-night planning sessions turned into shared dinners. Shared dinners turned into long walks where we talked about everything except quarterly targets. One evening, she stopped mid-sentence. What? I asked. You don't shrink anymore, she said. I frowned slightly. Shrink. You used to preface every strong opinion with apology. Now you just say it. I thought about that. I stopped asking permission to exist, I replied. She reached for my hand. Good. What grew between us wasn't built on sacrifice. It was built on alignment. During the grand opening of Nova's new global headquarters, the atrium buzzed with employees, partners, press. I stood at the podium looking out at hundreds of faces. Nova didn't become a market leader because we defeated competitors, I said into the microphone. We became leaders because we refused to forget the fundamentals: trust, teamwork, and integrity. Applause filled the space. As it settled, my eyes drifted toward the back of the crowd. And there she was, Selena, standing quietly near the exit. No spotlight, no entourage, just watching. Our eyes met across the distance. She didn't look regretful. She looked proud. She gave me a small nod. Then she turned and walked out without saying a word. I didn't follow. I didn't need to, because in that moment, I understood something fully for the first time. The greatest victory isn't proving someone wrong. It's creating a life where their approval is no longer necessary. Years later, industry publications called me one of the most respected business leaders internationally. They praised strategy, vision, ethical infrastructure. But none of that was the real transformation. The real transformation was internal. I finally believed in my own worth without needing someone else to validate it. Natalie stood beside me, not as someone dependent on my sacrifice, but as a partner who strengthened my ambition while protecting my balance. Selena rebuilt her life away from headlines. I heard she mentors young founders now, teaching them the cost of ego and the value of accountability. And Brandon? He became a case study in business ethics courses, a cautionary tale about shortcuts disguised as intelligence. Sometimes I think back to that tiny rented office with broken furniture and impossible dreams. Back to the man who sold his car so a vision could survive. He deserved more than silent loyalty. He deserved recognition. The people who truly value you will never wait until you've become someone else's greatest success to recognize your worth.